a marble newel post, a hand-carved mahogany door, a section of gilded wall paneling. The home that once hosted presidents and set the course for the city's future was torn apart and scattered to the winds, leaving behind nothing but a ghost and a legend. It's a story about the fleeting nature of power, and how even the most solid symbols of an era can crumble into dust. And a queen needs a castle. The Palmers decided to build their home far from the established elite on Prairie Avenue. They chose the swampy, undeveloped northern shoreline of Lake Michigan. People thought they were crazy. They called the area the Sands. And at its heart, rising like a medieval fortress, was their mansion. Completed in 1885. It was unlike anything the city had ever seen. Designed by architects Henry Ives Cobb and Charles Sumner Frost, it wasn't a house. It was a statement. A Gothic revival castle with turrets, towers, and granite walls, so thick they could withstand a siege. There were no visible doorknobs on the outside, a deliberate choice to show that you could just walk in. You had to be invited. It was an imposing, almost intimidating structure that broadcasted one clear message. A new dynasty has arrived. The interior was just as breathtaking. Walking through the massive bronze doors, which reputedly weighed 1.5 tons, was like stepping into a European palace. A grand, 3-story central hall with a glass ceiling flooded the space with light. There was a Louis XVI-style salon, a Moorish-themed room, an Elizabethan library, and a grand ballroom. But the most stunning feature was Bertha Palmer's private art gallery. She had one of the finest eyes for art in America and amassed an incredible collection of French Impressionist paintings, works by Monet, Renoir, Degas long before they were fashionable. She bought them directly from the artists in Paris, often shocking her conservative Chicago peers. This castle became the social and political epicenter of Chicago. The Palmers entertained everyone who mattered. President Ulysses S. Grant was a guest. So were visiting royalty and titans of industry. A dinner invitation from Bertha Palmer could make or break a person's social standing. She used the mansion as a stage to project her influence, most notably during the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition. As the head of the board of lady managers for the fair, Bertha hosted lavish events at the mansion, solidifying her role as the de facto cultural leader of the city. For decades, the Palmer Mansion wasn't just on Lakeshore Drive. It was Lakeshore Drive. It set the standard for luxury and power, and an entire neighborhood of millionaires' mansions grew up around it, all trying to capture a fraction of its grandeur. For nearly 2 more decades, she reigned as the Dowager Queen of Chicago society. The Gilded Age, with its extravagant displays of personal wealth, was giving way to a new, more modern era. Tastes were shifting. The heavy, ornate styles of the Victorian period started to look dated, even oppressive. The grand mansions of the super-rich were beginning to be seen not as castles, but as white elephants. When Bertha Palmer died in 1918, the fate of the mansion fell to her sons, Honor and Porter Palmer Jr. They were wealthy men in their own right, but they lived in a different world than their parents. They had their own homes, their own modern tastes. Mantelpieces from the dining room, the ornate hinges, the stained glass windows, the library's hand-carved shelves, all were sold off to the highest bidder. People weren't just buying architectural salvage. They were buying a piece of Chicago history, a tangible connection to a legendary era. It was as if the city itself was scavenging the remains of a fallen monarch. The famous art collection, thankfully, was preserved. Bertha had bequeathed the bulk of her Impressionist masterpieces to the Art Institute of Chicago, where they form the core of the museum's collection to this day. It's her most enduring legacy. But the house itself, the vessel that contained all that beauty and power, was scattered. Its pieces were incorporated into other buildings across the country. A doorway might have ended up in a suburban home, a mantelpiece in a fancy new restaurant. The castle was atomized, its spirit dispersed. Once the site was cleared, a new, modern structure rose in its place. A 22-story luxury apartment building. It was sleek, efficient, and profitable. The very embodiment of the new era. It offered its residents something the old mansion never could: a view of the lake, unobstructed by a neighboring castle. The symbolism was impossible to miss. The singular dynastic power of the Palmer family had been replaced by the distributed luxury of the modern age. Today, if you walk down Lakeshore Drive, there is no plaque, no monument, no marker to indicate where the Palmer Mansion once stood. There is only the apartment building at 1350 North Lakeshore Drive. The ghost of the castle is gone, but its story lingers. is a reminder that even the most powerful symbols of an age are temporary. The trends, tastes, and economic forces that create a landmark can just as easily conspire to destroy it. The story of the Pullman Mansion is more than just the tale of a demolished building. It's about the life cycle of a city. It's about the shift from the Gilded Age to the Roaring Twenties, from the power of the individual tycoon to the power of corporate development. Bertha Palmer built a fortress to cement her family's legacy in stone. But in the end, her true legacy wasn't the house. It was the priceless art she gifted to the public and the very land she developed, which remains Chicago's most prestigious address. The castle is gone, but the Queen's influence is still all around us. Imagine stepping back in time to the late 19th century, right here in Chicago. The city is booming, a chaotic symphony of ambition, smoke, and steel. And from this chaos, a new kind of royalty is emerging. The industrial titans. At the very top of this pyramid stands one man, George Pullman. Today, we know him for his famous railway cars. But in his time, he was a force of nature, a man who literally changed how America moved. Pullman wasn't born into wealth. He was a cabinet maker from New York who arrived in Chicago with a vision and an unstoppable drive. He saw the future, and it was on rails. Pullman's genius wasn't just in building a better sleeping car. It was in creating an entire system. He revolutionized travel, turning grueling, days-long train journeys into luxurious experiences. The Pullman Palace car wasn't just a place to sleep. It was a hotel on wheels, complete with fine dining, plush interiors, and impeccable service. The public loved it, and the railroads couldn't get enough. Money poured in, and Pullman's influence grew exponentially. He became one of the most powerful men in America, a true industrial king. And like any king, he needed a castle. So, where does a man with unimaginable wealth and power choose to plant his flag? In Chicago, there was only one answer: Prairie Avenue. In the 1870s, this street wasn't just a desirable address. It was the asterisk address. It was Millionaires' Row, a dazzling procession of grand mansions owned by the city's most powerful families, the Fields, the Armours, the Kim. To live on Prairie Avenue was to announce to the world that you had arrived. For George Pullman, just arriving wasn't enough. He had to dominate. In 1873, he did something that stunned even Chicago's wealthiest elite. He purchased a plot of land on the corner of Prairie Avenue and 18th Street. But he didn't just buy it. He paid the highest price per square foot ever recorded in the city's history. This wasn't a simple real estate transaction. It was a declaration. Pullman was sending a clear message to everyone, from his business rivals to the old money families. I am the new king of this city. He wasn't just joining the club, he was building its new headquarters. And the house he built was a fortress of power, a massive, 3-story brownstone and granite behemoth, designed by the famed architect Henry S. Jaffray. It wasn't warm or inviting. It was imposing, solid, almost intimidating. With its turrets, grand portico, and elaborate ironwork, it looked less like a family home and more like a corporate headquarters or a private citadel. Inside, it was a palace of opulence. Hand-carved woods from around the world, priceless artworks, and a conservatory filled with exotic plants. But every detail was carefully chosen, not just for beauty, but for what it represented: global reach, immense wealth, and unshakable authority. This mansion wasn't built to be a cozy home for his family. It was built to be seen. It was a stage. It was where Pullman would host presidents, foreign dignitaries, and fellow industrial magnates. It was where he would broker deals that would shape the nation's economy. The house on Prairie Avenue was the physical embodiment of George Pullman's ambition. It wasn't just a place to live. It was an announcement, carved in stone and mortar, that a new power had risen in America, and his name was Pullman. This wasn't just a home. It was a statement, an exercise in absolute control. We begin with the style. French Second Empire. Think of the grandest buildings in Paris during the mid-19th century, with their iconic mansard roofs and ornate details. Now, imagine that, transplanted and amplified into a private residence. This was a style that screamed power and sophistication, a deliberate choice to align the owner with the world's cultural and political elite. But the ambition didn't stop at the exterior. Inside, this house was a self-contained universe of luxury. It had its own private theater, not a simple media room, but a lavish space designed for professional-level performances. It had a private bowling alley, a feature of almost unimaginable extravagance for the time. There was even a magnificent pipe organ, its music filling the grand halls. Every single element, from the doorknobs to the light fixtures, was custom-made. Nothing was ordinary, nothing was off the shelf, and certainly, nothing was easily replaceable. This was the ultimate expression of control. If something didn't exist, it would be willed into existence. One of the most breathtaking features was the palm room. Imagine stepping into a tropical oasis in the middle of a temperate climate. It was a massive conservatory, crowned with an enormous glass dome, flooding the space with natural light. This wasn't just a room with a few plants. It was an engineering marvel, a symbol of man's ability to conquer nature and create his own personal paradise, no matter the season outside. The construction of this house was an epic undertaking. Visuals from the time, often in stark black and white, show an army of craftsmen and laborers toiling away. It was a project on an industrial scale, more akin to building a cathedral than a home. Each day a testament to the owner's unwavering vision and seemingly bottomless resources. Now, let's step inside this palace and explore its rooms of power. The interior design of this house was a carefully crafted language, with every room speaking volumes about authority, wealth, and the social order. Our first stop is the Egyptian room. At a time when Europe was fascinated with ancient Egypt, fueled by archaeological discoveries and colonial expansion, this room was a bold statement, filled with exotic symbolism, hieroglyphic motifs, and designs inspired by pharaohs' tombs. It wasn't just about decoration. It projected an imperial mindset, aligning the owner with the power and mystique of ancient empires, suggesting a dynasty that was just as grand and enduring. It was a way of saying, my influence, like that of the pharaohs, spans the globe and will stand the test of time. From there, we move into the drawing room. This was the primary stage for social influence, and its design reflects that perfectly. The sheer scale of the room was designed to awe and impress visitors the moment they entered. High ceilings, vast open spaces, and opulent furnishings all contributed to a sense of grandeur. This was also a space where feminine power was subtly asserted. As the domain of the lady of the house, it was where she would receive guests, manage social calendars, and forge the alliances that were crucial to the family's standing. The decor, while luxurious, was also elegant and tasteful, showcasing her role as a cultural gatekeeper. Next, we enter the red room. The color itself is significant, deep, rich, and associated with power and passion. This space was semi-private, a step back from the public-facing drawing room. It was here that more intimate gatherings would take place, where trusted allies were entertained and important. Behind the scenes, conversations happened. The red room was a space of controlled intimacy, where the owner could exercise influence on a more personal level, away from the prying eyes of the larger social world. It was a nexus of personal relationships and political maneuvering. Finally, we arrive at the dining room. This room was designed to communicate permanence and strength, drawing inspiration from medieval castles. Think dark, heavy woods, baronial-style furniture, and a long, imposing dining table that could seat dozens of guests. Dining here was a formal, almost ceremonial affair. It wasn't just about food, it was about reinforcing hierarchy, the seating arrangements, the elaborate service, the sheer weight of the decor. It all served to remind everyone present of the hostess' power and the solid, unshakable foundation of their wealth. Every meal was a performance of permanence. From the exoticism of the Egyptian room to the medieval strength of the dining room, each space within this architectural marvel was a chapter in a story of power. It shows how interior design can be used as a powerful tool, a language to communicate wealth, establish hierarchy, and assert control over one's world. This house was more than a home. It was a carefully constructed universe, a monument to ambition and a masterclass in the art of power. It's not just a home. It's a world unto itself, a perfectly oiled machine humming with secrets and sacrifice. Forget the glamorous parties and the effortless elegance you see from the outside. The real story, the one we never get to witness, is happening below stairs. Imagine a house so vast it requires a small army to run. Dozens of people, each with a specific role, working in perfect sync to create an illusion of perfection for the family living above. From the head butler orchestrating every detail to the youngest housemaid polishing silver, their lives are dedicated to maintaining an impossible standard. The house breathes, not because of its owners, but because of them. They are the unseen gears that keep the grand clockwork ticking. Their days aren't filled with leisure. They start before the sun rises, and end long after the family has gone to bed. Long hours are the norm. Discipline is ironclad, and loyalty is not just expected, it's demanded. They see everything, hear everything, yet they must remain invisible, silent witnesses to the dramas and decadence of the wealthy. Their personal lives, their own dreams and worries, are pushed aside for the sake of service. Think about the infamous story of Maggie Davis, the head housekeeper who single-handedly thwarted an intruder one night. While the family slept soundly, unaware of the danger, Maggie confronted the man, protecting the house and its inhabitants with a fierceness born from years of devotion. She wasn't just an employee. She was the guardian of that world. The next morning, she was back to overseeing the breakfast service, as if nothing had happened. Her bravery became a hushed legend among the staff, a symbol of their silent, unwavering commitment. This is the fundamental paradox of their existence. Above stairs, life is a spectacle of luxury, every whim catered to, every surface gleaming. It's a world of comfort built on a foundation of someone else's hard work. But below stairs, in the labyrinth of kitchens, laundry rooms, and staff quarters, it's a different reality. It's a life of discipline, precision, and immense personal sacrifice. The pristine tablecloths hide the calloused hands that iron them. The perfectly prepared meals hide the sweat and stress of the kitchen. It's a system that has existed for centuries. This symbiotic relationship between the served and the servants. The mansion is more than just brick and mortar. It's a living entity, an ecosystem where the glamour of the few is sustained by the diligence of the many. They are the true heart of the house, the keepers of its secrets, and the silent architects of its splendor. So the next time you see a grand estate, remember the hidden world within. Remember the army of individuals whose tireless efforts create that picture of perfect luxury. Their story is one of dedication, resilience, and quiet dignity. A life lived in the shadows so that others can live in the light. Now, if you know anything about American industrial history, you've heard of Pullman. He built a railroad empire, designed the famous Pullman sleeping cars that changed travel forever, and even constructed an entire town for his workers just south of Chicago. He was a giant of his time, a man whose decisions could ripple across the nation, making or breaking fortunes, and even sparking one of the most significant labor strikes in U.S. history. His name was synonymous with power, innovation, and an almost king-like authority. When George Pullman spoke, people listened. The nation listened. His mansion on Prairie Avenue was a hub of activity, a symbol of his vast influence. But then came 1897. George Pullman died of a heart attack. His death was as dramatic as his life. Fearing that vengeful former employees might desecrate his grave, his family buried him in a lead-lined coffin, encased in a massive block of concrete and steel rails. They wanted to ensure he would rest in peace, protected even in death. But, while his body was secure, the empire of influence he had built began to quietly unravel. This is where our story shifts from the loud clamor of industry to a profound and telling silence. The power didn't vanish in a single, explosive moment. Instead, it slowly, quietly drained away from the family and the magnificent home he left behind. The story of the Pullman family after his death is a poignant tale of decline. A perfect example of how personal influence is often fleeting and cannot be passed down like a piece of property. The fate of his children tells much of this story. Pullman had hoped for a dynasty, for his sons to carry on his legacy. But it was not to be. His son, George Jr., was a troubled figure, never quite living up to his father's immense expectations. He passed away relatively young, leaving no real mark on the family business. His other son, Walter Sanger Pullman, also died young, his potential unfulfilled. The Mala line, the direct successors to the Pullman name and power, was cut short. There would be no second-generation industrial titan to carry the torch. Then there were his daughters, Florence and Harriet. They had grown up in the lap of luxury, central figures in Chicago's high society. Florence married, moved away, and started her own life, her connection to the source of the family's power becoming more distant. Harriet, however, remained. She stayed in the family's grand Prairie Avenue mansion, the very house that had once been the epicenter of so much activity. Imagine that house. In its heyday, it was filled with the sounds of business deals, political negotiations, and lavish parties. The halls would have echoed with the footsteps of the nation's most powerful people. But after George Pullman's death, and as the years went on, a quiet descended. One by one, the family members were gone. First the patriarch, then his sons. Harriet's sister moved on. Finally, only Harriet was left, living alone in this vast, cavernous monument to a bygone era. She became the solitary guardian of a silent legacy. The house itself stood strong, a magnificent architectural statement. But the energy, the influence, the power that once animated it, was gone. It was no longer the command center of an empire. It was just a building, a very large, very empty house. The silence that filled its halls was the sound of influence fading. It's a powerful reminder that true power isn't in the buildings we construct or the money we accumulate. It resides in the individual, in their vision, their drive, and their ability to command respect and attention. And when that individual is gone, the power often goes with them, leaving behind only echoes and memories. The Pullman story isn't just about a family. It's a timeless lesson about the fragile, temporary nature of greatness. The very industrial boom that had built these fortunes was now coming to consume their neighborhood. Factories and printing presses belched smoke and noise just blocks away. Automobile showrooms, once a novelty, now lined the streets, bringing constant traffic. The idyllic, exclusive retreat that Prairie Avenue once was, had vanished. So, what happens when the ultra-rich feel their sanctuary is threatened? They leave. One by one, the elite families packed their bags and abandoned their palatial homes. It was a slow, agonizing exodus. And in their wake, a different kind of life rushed in to fill the void. The grand mansions, once symbols of prestige, were carved up into boarding houses. Warehouses popped up where manicured lawns used to be. Crime rates soared, and the street that once hosted presidents and royalty became known for its brothels and vice dens. The Pullman Mansion, once the crown jewel of the neighborhood, was now trapped in a sea of urban decay, a lonely monument to a bygone era. It's a stark reminder that even the greatest power can't survive when its surroundings collapse. By 1921, the final curtain was about to fall on the Pullman dynasty's grand stage. This wasn't a slow, sad decay into ruin. It was a calculated, deliberate demolition of a legacy. The family decided to auction off everything. In October of that year, the massive doors of the Prairie Avenue mansion swung open to the public for the very first time. Imagine the scene. Hundreds of ordinary Chicagoans who had only ever stared at the imposing facade from the street, now flooding into the private chambers of one of the city's most powerful families. It was less of a prestigious estate sale and more of a fire sale. Priceless objects, European antiques, and custom-made furniture that had cost fortunes were sold for pennies on the dollar. A chair that cost hundreds was knocked down for $5. Intricate art pieces went for less than the price of a dinner. People weren't just buying items, they were buying a piece of a fallen empire. After the auction, the stripping began. Architectural elements, hand-carved woodwork, marble fireplaces, ornate fixtures were pried from the walls and sold off piece by piece. This was a methodical dismantling, an intentional erasure. The family wanted to leave nothing behind, to ensure the mansion could never be used by anyone else. It was the ultimate act of control. Even in defeat, amidst the chaos of the auction and the tearing down of a landmark, there's one small, touching detail that stands out. One thing was explicitly not for sale. It wasn't a priceless painting or a family jewel. It was Mrs. Pullman's beloved dog, a small black Canton terrier named Bosco. In the grand catalogue of priceless possessions being sold off, a special note was made that Bosco was not part of the auction. He would remain with the family. It's a tiny, humanizing detail in the middle of this epic story of wealth, power, and collapse. While an entire empire was being sold for parts, the one thing they couldn't put a price on was the love for a family pet. And so, as the wrecking ball swung, and the Prairie Avenue mansion was reduced to rubble, little Bosco was safe, a final, living remnant of the life that once filled those now-vanished halls. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, make sure to like and subscribe for more dives into history.